Hi, everyone. This is Leslie Brill, Chapter President of Bronx River Sound Shore Audubon. And thank you all for being here for our Finch program. We're honored and delighted to have with us Matthew Young tonight, co-author of The Stokes Guide to Finches of the United States and Canada, with a recent book. Um, I'm going to read his bio by way of introduction. Matthew Young is a co-lead on the Evening Grosbeak Road to Recovery project, in addition to being the founder and board president of the Finch Research Network. Matthew worked in the field of social work with special needs populations at the William George Agency for 12 plus years and is currently a wild bird products specialist and conservation coordinator for Aspen Song Wild Bird Food. Additionally, Matthew worked at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology across 15 years, his work covering golden-winged warblers, voices of Hawaii's birds, and Merlin bird ID, and was project lead on the lab's first eruptive finch survey in 1999. Widely known as a preeminent authority on finches of North America, he has written finch species accounts for breeding bird atlases and birds of the world and published several papers on finches and the Red Crossbill vocal complex. So we are excited to learn more about these beautiful birds, and thank you so much. I'm going to switch to speaker view and turn it over
Yeah,
to.
thanks. Hey, Berkey, that first erupted bird survey, that was for Bird Source. Does anyone remember Bird Source? That was
Barely.
it predated eBird, even though I know you're not an eBird person necessarily. So that predated eBird for anybody who remembers Bird Source. Um, Let me go over here. I gotta do a screen share.
And everyone put yourselves on mute, please. We'll have a Q&A at the end. You can type questions into the chat. Thanks.
Gonna do a share. All right, can everybody see that? Or at least one person can see that, hopefully.
Yes.
Um, Good, good, good. So again, thanks for that introduction, Leslie. It's always an honor to do these talks. This is, I think I was telling Leslie before she started letting people in. This is my 31st talk on the book in covered 19 states in the last 13, 14 months since the book came out. The book came out so this presentation will be mainly about the book, but obviously there's a lot of overlap in the projects that the Finch Research Network is involved in, and we have an old chapter on the on research and conservation in the book that Finch Research Network is doing. Um, so yeah, Finch Research Network and the Stokes Guide to Finches, United States and Canada. There's our beautiful finches there. They're always again, they look like I always say, I get interviewed all the time this time of year after the Finch forecast comes out. And everybody always says, why such interest in the winter Finch forecast? And Ron Pittaway, the one that uh, kind of was the originator of the winter Finch forecast, always said, and I always kind of say the same thing a lot of times. We get some finches in the winter that kind of brings sometimes the northeastern gray skies to light. It's like a Christmas tree present, seeing a flock of grosbeaks or red poles in your backyard. Um, so where I got my start. So my undergraduate degree I did in meteorology and hydrogeology at Oneonta State. That was the end of that when I was about to finish my degree, as some of us do, and I realized I did not want to go into the field of hydrogeology, meteorology. Meteorology, I actually still to this day, I kind of joke about. I'll finish I get a minor in meteorology, but I started out as a meteorology major. I still joke that maybe I'll finish my meteorology degree in retirement. But the end of that year, 95, the most common job as a hydrogeologist in 1995 was something called Lust. It was the assessment of leaky underground storage tanks at old abandoned gas stations. And I said, nah, I don't think I'm going to do that. So I bought a car, I bought a pair of binoculars, started bird watching a little bit. I went to a Grateful Dead concert with my brother David at the Nick in Albany. And I got up the next day and drove across the country to a job I had as a host at the Lake Yellowstone Inn. And so really my spark or seminal moment in life. First day I landed, I took about 10 days to get out to Yellowstone. I landed Yellowstone and grabbed the binoculars. I go to Lower Falls, and a flock of crossbills flew in and started feeding above me. And you don't know, I always say, the power of birds, they really can transform a life and change people. Any kind of engagement with nature, coming from also working in the mental health field with at-risk youth, I think they could be absolute game changers for people. And it transformed my life, and my life pivoted at that moment. And I basically said, I'm going to become an ornithologist. And I really never looked back in a lot of ways, even though I kind of had these dual professional lives since the mid to late 90s. Um, it was from Yellowstone. I was there for about 3 months. I took a position after Yellowstone at the base of this mountain here. That's Mount Adams, which is the kind of forgotten mountain in the Cascades. I took a position in the AmeriCorps program, which is like a domestic-based Peace Corps. And it was really there that I was able to do a lot of different work in the environmental field. And I was actually able to carve out doing field work in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, doing bird surveys and doing carnivore camera sets for pine martens and the Canada lynx. And I also did the first baseline bird surveys in the first North American canopy crane in the Wind River National Forest. It was an old growth Douglas fir western hemlock forest. 225-foot crane with a 250-foot jib that we I did bird surveys in, and that solidified my career really in ornithology, and also giving back to society as a volunteer. And that photo there was from 95, 96, but we just had a 30-year anniversary actually, and 20 of the 30 of us came in, and many of us had not seen each other in decades, and we picked right back up where we had left off as best friends. It was the most amazing, game-changing year of my life, and yeah, it was really special to be back out there again. And these are photos just from August. Um, it was great. So here we are now, 30 years later. I launched the Finch Research Network in 2020. The first landing page was the Crossbill Project, which is kind of the was the what kind of coalesced a group of us that are on the board of directors. I had people from the board of directors from Cornell, professors at Cornell, Washington State, Oregon State, uh, UC Davis, two people in Canada as well, a person in Germany. That's an expert sound recordist. And here's the today landing page where we have this Evening Grosbeak International Road to Recovery project that I'm fully on. But as there is with any of these stories that kind of take shape in life, a lot of times there's these serendipitous moments. The backstory on the book. So it was, 8/7/2020. We were just into the pandemic, a few months at that point. We were just about to witness the biggest Finch eruption in a couple decades at least. I'd say it's probably the 2020-21 eruption was the first. We had a super flight about 10 years, 12 years before then, but that one was quite as good as the 97-98 one, but it was the next best one in a 25, 27 year period. But 8/7/2020, Lillian Stokes got a call from the director of the Harris Center for Conservation Education and said, Lillian, hey, there are crossbills landing in our parking lot. There's some photos of those crossbills in the parking lot grinning. The woman started grabbing her camera, came down there and started to take photos. And then she realized she needed to send them to some mat at Cornell Lab of Ornithology. I was still at the Lab of O then. Uh, and so she sent me recordings, and I started to ID the call types, doing an audio spectrographic analysis of those crossbill recordings. And so there's some more photos of those birds at the Harris Center. There's a spectrograph of actually a call type that we just described, type 12, about a year ago. It's the northeastern crossbill. It's the one that comes down the coast. It's really kind of increased significantly over the last 20 years here in the Northeast. And so Lillian always says, you know, where paths crossed over Red Crossbill. She calls it her second spark bird. So as pandemic, a super flight of finches was about to take hold. Paths crossed over crossbills. And she always says, so the story behind the photograph of that red crossbill is I was at Montague Sand Plains in Massachusetts. It was me, Lillian, and Don. Don actually unfortunately just passed about a month ago, Don Stokes. Unfortunately, it was great to get to know Don, and this book really still wouldn't even happen without Don's support. But we were all three of us were at Montague Sand Plains, and somebody come pulling up and said, there's no crossbills. I've been here an hour, there's no crossbills around. They pulled off, and literally within like less than a minute, a flock of crossbills flew down, landed on the back, basically behind the car that they drove up in, started grinning. And this bird kept popping out from behind the kind of tire looking at us. And Lillian always says this bird recruited us to do this book together. So we signed the book contract in the summer of 2021, and it came out a little over 3 years later. So the backstory, the sections of this book, I just gave you the backstory. We have the main breeding finches in North America. There's about 17 of those. We have a chapter on finch eruptions, a chapter on vagrant finches, a chapter on the finches of Hawaii, a chapter on feeding and attracting finches, a chapter on research and conservation, and we also end with how you can help. So I'm going to break out into these main species that make up the bulk of the that breed here in North America. Gray crown rosy finches. There's kind of two groups in the gray crown rosy finch. Um, Brown cheek group and a gray cheek group. The gray cheek group is kind of also known as the Hepburn's race. Uh, but we also kind of refer to them in the book as island finches and cloudland finches. As a lot of people might know, the rosy finches, most of the gray crown and all of the brown capped and black are mountaintop breeders, perhaps the highest breeding species in North America. They breed anywhere from 10 to about 14,000 feet here in North America. But there is one subspecies, Gracia nucha, Adak Island. It breeds out in the Aleutians. That actually breeds at sea level, is quite a bit bigger than the rest of the gray crown rosy finches. And some of the recent studies or genetic work on the bird actually suggest it could very well be a different species. And we kind of touch upon that a little bit in the book. These are all maps right from the book that are here as well. The two southern ones are kind of listed as endangered in Birds of the World. They're quite a bit less common. In fact, all the rosy finches are thought to be decreasing significantly in the Finch Research Network. One of our many projects that we fundraise around, the Red Crossbill Project, the Grosbeak Project. We have a Purple Finch Project. There's a Rosy Finch Project, and then there's the Finch Forecast. And we also try to raise some money for honeycreeper efforts with the Maui Forest Recovery uh, project, our forest recovery team as well. But here's the two beautiful rosy finches. We have a kind of deep dives that we do in the book that we kind of highlight. Uh, there's actually a gene in the rosy finches that actually they have been able to isolate. that helps rosy finches keep oxygen in their blood, and that's how they actually can nest and succeed at such high elevations. We wish we could have that if we wanted to go on top of these mountains. The two western goldfinches, lesser goldfinch and Lawrence's goldfinch, uh, in the book, Lily talks about the tale of two cities in the quick take or the introductory essay that she writes for all of the species, the key species in the book. There's a black-back lesser goldfinch and a green-back lesser goldfinch. There needs to be more work on this. Both of these species, quite frankly, are one of or two of the least studied species in North America, along with Cassin's finch. Just absolutely gorgeous birds. Interesting thing is George Newbold Lawrence wrote Birds of the World, Birds of North America in 1860 with Spencer Baird and John Cleason. Kaysen named it Lawrence's after Lawrence. Lawrence's goldfinch after Lawrence, and Baird named Cassin's finch after Cassin. So the only two species, Lawrence's goldfinch and Cassin's finch, that might end up having their name changed. That was kind of a topic that's quite in the news over the last year or two here with the name changes of certain of the species in North America that have been named after people. We'll see if that actually goes through. It sounds like that project is kind of somewhat, I don't know if it's stalled, but it sounds like they're gonna do some low hanging fruit first, and maybe they won't do all of the species. We'll see. American goldfinch. It's everybody. Everybody knows American goldfinch. It's why we put it on the cover of the bird, right, the book, right in the middle. Again, deeper dives we have in these boxes that we highlight in the book. New research says female bird color is status signal and settles disputes among females. And believe it or not, I still get this question once in a while when I give presentations or I give talks to people. Where did all my goldfinches go? It's the only one of the finches that actually molts twice. So yeah, that gray olive yellow plumage, I always tell people, well, they might not have went anywhere. They might have just changed color. And American goldfinch indeed does that. As I said, molts twice. It gets its color from carotenoid pigments that it picks up in its diet, or it gets carotenoids in its diet. And that's where the pigment is expressed yellow. Same thing happens with house finches. Females choose the brightest males. And getting to house finch, again, I think one of the things that's very cool and different about this book, it's not a field guide only. Lillian always calls it a guide, a field guide plus plus, is we really tried to write a book that was both a reference guide. There's actually a literature cited section in the book, about 12, 15 pages of that, which is different for any of the other Stokes guide, except for those first few behavioral guides that they worked on many, many years ago. But we also tried to write these kind of, particularly Lily, wrote these creative introductory quick essays at the beginning of each of the species to kind of bring to life the bird's natural history and personality. And so, I still, a lot of people, believe it or not, when I give presentations, do not realize that house finches were not native to the East. And it was 1940s. There was a sign on the Long Island, New York pet store that read Hollywood finches, a marketing ploy for pet dealers to make imported finches glamorous. Who would have dreamed that label disguised the Trojan horse of a small population of imported Western finches? And so, yeah, they were being imported from the West Coast. There was a flock, I believe, seen on one of the Long Island Christmas turnpikes that kind of ticked people off. And then they did some research on it and they started to realize it was coming from a particular store. They went to the feds. They were about to actually they were kind of going to shut the business down from what you read in the literature. But the person got wind of it and released the house finches. And he had actually been releasing house finches for a little while. But once released to the east, they would take over and become one of the most successful range expansions in U.S. ornithological history. Uh, One of the things we found when we actually researched this book is there's a pretty skewed sex ratio of more males than females for most of the finches. And as I already said, they get that red color from the diet that they eat. Cassin's finch, which I already mentioned, is a kind of a mountaintop, uh, not mountaintop, but mountainous species out in the western part of the United States. Again, a beautiful bird. It's in the complex with the house finch and the purple finches. It's in one of the things we realize is for years as a person that's always been kind of like the research area is probably two main areas of research really are vocalizations. I would say ecological associations of these finches is Hacassid finch is one of the species that imitates other birds, particularly other finches. The fascinating thing is American goldfinch and house finch, which are the top of those ancestral trees for the goldfinches and these red purple finches. Neither one of those mimic other birds or imitate other birds, but the descendants do. Lawrence's and Lessers are really good imitators. Purples and Cassids are very good imitators, but American goldfinch and house finch do not imitate other species. So, kind of an interesting. And females also sing in a lot of the finches. So, those are kind of two areas of research that needs more research done, actually. As I mentioned, the Winter Finch Project, we put this out every year. It's become one of the most highly anticipated ornithological articles of the year. When people are getting excited, our finch is going to come here. It was started by Rob Pittaway, who also unfortunately passed away about a year and a half ago. He started in 1999, but actually he started it before that. But it was 1999 when he kind of solidified the internet version of it. Focuses just on the eastern part of North America. We don't do the west because topography is very tricky, although we do have interest in trying to do something in the west at some point. It was originated in Ontario. When he decided to kind of retire doing it, he passed it down to Tyler Orr, who is a Finch Research Network board member. And I kind of work closely with Tyler putting this out every year at the end of September. These dots here show actually, Tyler will send out this questionnaire to almost 100 people across the Northeast, the Maritimes, across Canada, the Boreal, all the way to British Columbia and Alaska, asking for assessments on about 15 key tree species. Uh, we asked for qualitative data, not quantifying data or quantitative data. And that's how we put the forecast together every year, whether these birds are going to come at us or not. As I mentioned before, 2020, 21 was a super flight. All the finches came in this that year. There were siskins all the way down in Bermuda, the Everglades. It was the first year that Evening Grosbeak had been seen in Florida since the 80s. Uh, Hoary redpoll I still have there, but we all lost a species there with hoary redpoll being lumped recently or a year ago. Uh, that generational these super flights are often caused by a number of factors coming together at once. So it was a generational spruce co-crop that year. There's been this ongoing spruce budworm outbreak, and there's also kind of a natural cycle to food crops that are tend to be on a biennial pattern, and that all kind of lined up that led to that year. Oh, I went backwards. What are the drivers again? We asked for an assessment for about 15 key tree species. Conifer seed is obviously a big driver of these finch eruptions, particularly for crossbills and siskins, but also for the other finches as well to some degree. Deciduous seeds such as birch and alder catkins are big drivers of redpoll eruptions. And then our frugivore pine grosbeak is a mountain ash bird. I would love to see Long Island get a pine grosbeak this year, but we'll see. It's probably been decades since the last pine grosbeak showed up on Long Island. So, getting to this year's forecast, we actually predict a multi-finch species event I don't think finches are going to be dripping off the trees. We do believe, though, it'll be the best finch here in 5 years since that super flight. If you want to find finches and you go out birding, particularly if you get upstate, but who knows, Long Island sometimes can be good for finches as well. You're going to be able to find finches around. Evening grosbeaks and red bulls and pine grosbeaks are going to be findable in upstate New York for sure. Um, and I think these numbers of evening grosbeaks, which are already found in some of the mid-Atlantic states, and red polls, I think there's been a red poll or two downstate already as well. So if you want to find finches or you want to book a trip, let me know. They're going to be findable this year for sure. We have a Purple Finch project as well. We cover this in the paper, but I actually, or in the book, but we have a brand new paper coming out that does the kind of shows the quantitative data around the two different call types of actually purple finches that we described for the first time ever. Uh, the two subspecies actually have slight differences in morphology, but their calls and their songs are actually notably different. Hopefully, you guys can hear this. My heat just kicked on, but I'm going to play these two different subspecies of and call types of purple finch. So there's our eastern one, pretty squeaky sounding. A lot of people don't know this call, really. And then here's the western, quite a bit different sounding. A lot of people don't realize this. So we have a project. We actually have an area that we have a small grant program now, the Finch Research Network. We're hoping to find a student. We've been funding some student projects across the country at a few different universities: Cornell, University of Wisconsin-Madison, Washington State, UC Davis, Oregon State. We would like to find a student that would be willing to research. There's a potential area of overlap of these two subspecies in southwestern British Columbia. If you could kind of prove that they overlap and there's some assortative mating going on in that area of overlap, and they're actually mating with the correct subspecies or call type. If there's any of the finches, and I'm not really a proponent of splitting, I'm not really a proponent of splitting the grosbeaks or the crossbills. I do think purple finch is a species that could be split, and there's some good reasons behind that, given they're been known to evolve about 100,000 years ago genetically, and there are vocal differences and subtle plumage differences as well. Need to play that. Pine siskins in that superflight year, Audubon ran an article in their magazine actually on October 23rd. It was just an amazing eruption that year. There's the actual eBird map showing the number of pine siskins. They had basically ran an article saying pine siskins have taken over the country. Those deep purples are the higher densities of pine siskins. And look at the deep purples all in the South that year. The vice president of the Finch Research Network, Tim Spar, actually recorded for a month straight off the coast of, or actually just inland from Boston, night flight calling pine siskin for like a month that year. And siskin's the only one that really has been known to do big flights and night migration. The finches generally are diurnal migrants. There is a rare green morph. It's kind of a poorly named bird. 1% of the birds kind of have this kind of brownish, yellowish, greenish hue to it. They're pretty striking when you see them. We cover that in the book a bit. And siskins really are the food generalist of the finch group. As I said, red poll, just a gorgeous bird, but we did lose. Red poll has been lumped as of about a year ago. The hoary red poll and common red polls were lumped. You can kind of blame me. That study started at my house in Portland in 2012, 13, when I had a flock. presumably all four North American subspecies. And I invited a crew out from Cornell. I was working at Cornell at the time at the lab. I invited them out. They captured some birds, took some blood samples, and the study evolved from there that led to the birds being lumped together. So you can kind of blame me, I guess. I still think there's incredible value with going out and identifying the subspecies because red poles are just endlessly fascinating from a variability perspective, in my opinion. So yeah, it was they were lumped in the book. We covered them as separate species, kind of couched it under this red pole complex. Uh, Came out before the actual taxonomic change was announced. So we covered them separately, kind of covered it under a complex. That way, people, if they wanted to do a deep dive into how to identify hoary red poles, they could. Uh, the 2021 paper is the one that actually solidified them being lumped together. The knock on the first paper is they did not have enough of a sample size of that big white puffball hornamoni from Greenland. But in the extensive genetic work done in 21, Funk et al. Found that a chromosomally inverted supergene is what controls that frosty look of the birds. Other than that, they're almost genetically very, very, very similar. And they proposed for them to be lumped, and they were. Pine Grosbeaks again. I'm always rooting for Long Island to get in on the Pine Grosbeak fun. I did a presentation last night for Lycoming bird group in or I think it was Lycoming Audubon in Pennsylvania, and same thing with Pennsylvania. I'd love to see Pine Grosbeaks big into Pennsylvania. They're already in Rochester, and they're up on the lake shore. There was one reported near Albany. So we'll see. You never know. You always think maybe there's going to be a big eruption just some year, but it's probably been decades since one was on Long Island. We only get the Lucura subspecies, the boreal bird. That's the one we get here in the east. There are three kind of mountainous subspecies out west. Um, but just again, a gorgeous bird. The two northern ones are the most eruptive. The same thing with Evening Grosbeak, which I'm going to cover here. Um, I circled, as you can see on this map, I circled an area for a new call type we just described in a paper with some researchers from Morgan State. That line should actually extend into Alberta to about where the separating line is. I needed to redraw this and I forgot, but um, basically it's an area where type ones and threes meet, and they kind of produce this intermediate, excuse me, call type. Um, the five subspecies are recognized at this point. Um, and the two northern ones are the only ones that really are eruptive. Type three is the one we get here in the east. Although we just actually had a type one actually in Ohio the other day. We confirmed the first one in Ohio, and we had actually a type six in Massachusetts, but they are extremely rare because I've been digging for these birds for a while. I've known about a few of these type sixes showing up in the Great Lakes areas in recent years. Um, but generally speaking, they're pretty dang rare. I'm going to play here. There's the spectrogram of the five call types, and what a spectrogram is. I'm going to play, getting a little bit more into details of what those are here in a minute. But those are the spectrograms. It's a signature of the bird's voice. If you kind of drop the recording of one into a sound analysis program, that's the printout that you get. Here is type one in the West. I think they sound very different, but I understand that I've been kind of Finch focused for decades, and it might not be as different to others. Let's see here. Come on. Here we go. Kind of a pure tone whistle. whenever I hear these out west, they always throw me off at first. Like, are the Western managers around or something? Because the our type three that we get is quite a bit more burry and ringing quality to it, and the spectrogram's quite a bit different. And so, if you were to imagine what Type 6 looks like and sounds like, it literally sounds intermediate between the two. Like I said, we just did a whole analysis on the whole complex and ended up finding that there's this sort of area that is stabilizing in the middle section of the Canada boreal forest that they coalesced around this intermediate call type. So yeah, this bird is a bird that has declined 90% over the last 50 years. And this is a eBird trends map. As you can see there, lots of reds, lots of declines. Some of those areas, those blues, are actually areas of spruce bugworm outbreak where the bird is increasing. And we have had actually a spruce bugworm outbreak that's been going on for about the last 10 years in the Maritimes, Quebec, and Ontario. And that's why we're seeing a bit of an uptick on Evening Grosbeaks, although by no means have they bounced back to levels that people saw them in the 70s and 80s. As I mentioned, I'm the co-lead of this group, this international Evening Grosbeak Road Recovery Project. There's only 5 road to recovery species that have been designated by partners in flight. Um, and it's a collaborative with Carnegie Museum, Powder Mill Avian Research Center, Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, and the Finch Research Network. So we have a working group. It's actually over 70 people now. We have priority teams working on diet. I actually have a new paper coming out on diet as well. We analyzed literally tens of thousands of photos in the eBird or Macaulay Library collection, and we're able to come up with an analysis on diet. They eat a lot of maple seed and a lot of fruit actually, or seeds inside the fruit in the Rosaceae family. So the cherry family, black cherry, pin cherry, choke cherry, they eat a lot of cherries as well. Um, and like I said, we have a few different here groups. We have the diet, direct mortalities. All the finches are highly susceptible to window kills, unfortunately, because of their flocking social nature. So it's important to keep them a good distance away from windows. We have a habitat group. We have a migratory connectivity team, and so we have been traveling around the country the last couple of years. There's the field operations. We use these bow nets, and we've been capturing birds and putting satellite tags on them, and also nano tags. Nano tags are radio tags that are Modus Tower. It's like radio telemetry, but we've been putting these $2,000 satellite tags that we fundraise around. We help fundraise around for putting these satellite tags on. The advantages of the satellite tags is, we have 86 birds now tagged. We've tagged birds in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Michigan, and Utah. From those 86 birds, we have over 100,000 readings on position. The nano tags, which are the radio tags, they actually have to fly over a Modus tower to get a reading on. So it's valuable. You can really only do it in the east or the northeast because there's enough Modus towers, but they will not give us permits to do nano tags anywhere outside of the northeast because there's just not enough Modus towers. So it's kind of interesting. Here's the Modus Tower map, though. This project originated in Western Pennsylvania at David Yenny's house. He's my collaborator and co-lead on the International Working Group. And those are actually migratory trajectories of where birds flew over Modus Towers over the last of the 105 nano tags or no, more than 105 nanotags. I think we have like 400 nanotags, but we have 105 detections from those. So here's Northeast tagging of the satellite tags. Those are individuals moving around throughout the full annual cycle. That's the whole idea is you get information on where these birds are moving around in their full annual cycle, the connectivity, and then hopefully you can figure out where are some of the areas that they're at risk and why the populations are declining. As you can see, the one of the birds we actually six in mind actually blew our minds because most finches you read about aren't really birds that will migrate across lakes. That bird went to bed one night in Minnesota, and by the next morning, it was found actually in Ontario and had gone across the long trajectory or fetch of the lake. Believe it or not, you can see there in the blue or purple line there. It ended up breeding in so kind of fascinating. Here's our tagging efforts from last year. We've been tagging birds in the Adirondacks. We also tag birds here near my house in central New York. But some of them don't move that much at all, though. I mean, as you can see that bird there in Maine, some of the birds in Maine didn't move much. Some of the birds in Minnesota didn't move much. We realize that they probably are staying to breed. They're pretty secretive breeders, believe it or not. So here's kind of a map that shows a little more information on the Northeast tagging on the strength of the connectivity between winter and breeding grounds. And it also shows an overlay, which I need to update, quite frankly, of the extent of the spruce budworm outbreak. Those areas in gold or orange and red are the budworm outbreaks, and the strongest intensity of those outbreaks are in the deeper oranges and reds. That outbreak now actually goes all the way to it now beats the Lake Superior edge, actually. So, these budworm outbreaks, which are a naturally occurring insect, caterpillar, uh, these outbreaks become baby making bird factories. Really, quite frankly, they're a slow, high protein rich, uh, insect that they feed to their young. And believe it or not, evening grosbeaks and purple finches are budworm specialists. People might have heard in the past, like the budworm warblers. A lot of these species are opportunistic. Budworm warblers, Tennessee Bay breast, Cape May, have also seemingly been on the increase in the last 10 years, I would say. So there's the total of our tagging and banding summary as of now. We will do some more in this upcoming season, especially since it's an eruption year again. But yeah, we have radio tags on 180 birds, 86 satellite tags, 2 GPS tags, and we banded over 500 birds since the beginning of the project in all those states there. The Red Crossbill complex has anybody that's ever I don't know if anybody's in this group, although I think Berkey, you've got a couple recordings at various times over the years. Or Gail, I think you sent me some recordings. Yeah, I think you sent me some Red Crossbill recordings just a year or two ago. Um, a lot of people knew me as kind of the Crossbill guy for many years, even though I started really out as a Finch person 30 years ago. But Crossbills, when I was at the Lab of O, I mean, it's where, I would get these recordings of crossbills and I would identify them to call type and do this analysis on them. As I mentioned, we have this Red Crossbill project. Some believe they're evolving or incipient species. They do seem to act as good biological species most of their lives. However, I think what happens is there's either a great cone crop or a busting cone crop across wide areas that then force them to move, and then they bump into one another. Hybridization does appear to increase, keeping gene flow going. There are the spectrograms of the 12 call types for the Finch Research Network. Just described type 12 about a year ago. I was the lead author on it. It was something I had been working on for the better part of the last 15 years. I had known about it. We were pretty conservative before we described it. It's a bird that certainly it's been on the increase for a long time now here in the Northeast. In fact, it's the only finch species that has increased in the Northeast over the last 50 years is red crossbill. Just want to do a little ode to Tom Johnson, a friend of mine that was an incredible birder and field ornithologist and human being. He took this video footage of red crossbill feeding on Pipe 12, feeding at Cape May on Japanese black pine. Unfortunately, Tom is no longer with us, left us way too early. It's amazing footage, though. So there's at least a few of those Japanese. This was about 5 years ago. This was actually the Superflight year. There's a few of those Japanese black pines still alive, at least down in Cape May. And again, learning how to learn the sounds and how to read a spectrogram. I always like to use these two recordings of a crested oral pendulum at full speed and then half speed. Human brains have a hard time processing down fast enough to really hear the differences. If you slow it down, you really can hear it. So here's crested oral pendulum at full speed. And here it is at half speed. And you can kind of literally hear note for note that descending quality when you slow it down. And you can see how it actually it comes out as a signature on the spectrogram. So when it comes to crossbills, and again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds because anybody who knows me, I can really get into the weeds. Crossbills, generally speaking, they follow cone crops, conifer cone crops. So they nest in two main periods of the year, July to October, utilizing newly developed cone crops. Then January and April, they actually nest again. Yes, when there's 3 feet of snow on the ground and it's 0 degrees out, utilizing the last remaining cone crops. And so I did these foraging charts in this book. One of my contributions to science on laying out how crossbills move around through the year on what they feed on from July to June. Again, cone crops are forming, or any really food crops are forming May and June, and they ripen by July. And the green in these charts show the periods when they're nesting. And so, the scientist, Dr. Bankman, is in Wyoming, is really kind of, you know, been, been researching and pushing this idea that all the crossbills are uber specialists. And I really don't think that's the case. I think they kind of have three different life strategies. There are some that are very specialized, like Castor Crossbill, which used to be known as Type 9, but was raised to species status about 8 years ago and breeds just in one county in two mountain ranges in Idaho. Uh, then there's Type 2s, which are nomadic across the country and can feed and nest on almost anything. And then there's this Type 12. We also have Type 1 here in the East. That also is extremely generalist, is a pretty extreme generalist. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me that a crossbill in the East would be incredibly specialized on a single key conifer because we just don't have the densities of conifers here in the East compared to the Western United States. But we do have a good diversity of conifers. And so when it comes to crossbills, they really form residency or quasi-residency because they do move around a good bit, either by having a single conifer species that produces a reliable cone crop from year to year. It holds their seeds throughout the year, or by occurring in an area where you have a diversity of conifers with different ripening phenologies, meaning that they hold their seed and drop their seed at different times of the year. So a crossbill needs to get from one breeding cycle or breeding year to the next. So they really start out utilizing these spruces, the soft cone conifers first, and then by the end of the year, because the soft coat conifers have dropped their seed, they start to switch to the hard pines like red pine, jack pine, pitch pine, and even Japanese black pine. So, Bankman asked himself the question, is there a mountain range east of the Rockies that actually, or outside of the Rockies, I should say, that actually evolved that had no tree squirrels. It evolved there was a local variant of lodgepole pine that evolved in the absence of tree squirrels. If you put tree squirrels in the equation, they drive cone evolution. If you take them out of the equation, crossbills drive cone evolution. So he found them outrage in Cassia County. I know he went in the late 90s. He started recording them, started studying them, started doing a mark recapture on them. And he found out that they sounded different, they acted different, they didn't really move a heck of a lot. They had a large bill, and they really only stayed there to feed on that local variant of lodgepole pine. Um, so I'm going to play a recording that is like about 5 years ago. A About 40% of that range of Cassia County, the South Hills, and the Albion Mountains actually burned in a fire. And since then, we now have records of Cassia Crossbill in Colorado, Wyoming, and California. In fact, they've actually nested in Colorado in recent years. So I think this is an evolving story, and I would not be shocked to see this end up being lumped back in with the Crossbill complex. But this is what it sounds like. Pretty low frequency as crossbills go. Main area of frequency for this one is around 3 kilohertz or less. Um, Type two, I think, is a nomadic conifer switcher. It's abundant across the country, can feed just about anywhere. There's the spectrogram, and here's what it sounds like. Oh, I don't know why that didn't play. Here's what it sounds like. Kind of a ringing quality a little bit compared to Cassia. And 2 years ago, we had this massive eruption of like twos and fours and actually moved across the country from west to east. And here's just a map comparing 2022 and 23 to 23 and 24. And you can see we always have a few type twos here in the east, but you can just see, you could watch this in real time. I watched this in real time 2 years ago. These birds just moving across the country on the eBird map, and recordings were coming in every day. We were inundated with recordings to ID. And here is the map of, you can see all those eBird bubbles in the east. Here's type four, which to my ears sounds incredibly different. They all sound pretty different to me, but I realize I also have listened to far too many crossbill recordings for any healthy human being. So click, click, again, in nomadic conifer switcher. And again, the map. I mean, this one doesn't come east hardly ever. And the 23-24 eruption was just in my 25 years, by far the biggest eruption eastward I had ever seen of type four. And four different call types bred in New York that year in the incredible Eastern white pine crop that we had. Type 3 is the one that usually is the most eruptive here in the east, but it's been about 7 years since we actually have had a good eruption of type 3. Smallest billed bird again, erupts across the country. Types 2, 3, and 4 do that. And then type 12, the one we just actually um, described about a year ago. Oh, go back here. It actually has bred, actually, or at least attempted to breed on Long Island a few times, actually, in the last 10 years as well, out in those pitch pine barrens. There's over 33,000 recordings in the Macaulay Library, Cornell Macaulay Library collection. Is by far the most common bird in the collection. The next most common is Carolina Red at about 24,000. Oh, come on. Here's type 1, which is the Appalachian bird. Uh, Fairly common in southern New York some years, but much more common to the south, in the mountains of Virginia and the Carolinas. So hopefully everybody can hear the differences there and you don't think I'm completely crazy. But they do sound pretty different to my ears at this point. Now, when it comes to white-winged crossbill, I do think, it's in a lot of ways it's good to think of white-winged crossbill as part of the crossbill complex. It just happens to be a bird that has white-winged bars, but they really are the boreal crossbill. There's not a lot of red crossbills in the boreal. In fact, red crossbill really is more of a montane bird than a boreal bird. So again, there's a foraging chart. They really prefer white spruce, black spruce, and tamarack are their main species that they're keying in on. So vagrant finches, we do a chapter that ends like the core of the book. The vagrant finches, the wrong bird in the wrong place at the wrong time that has the potential to send birders into mega rarity delirium, kind of like that common cuckoo. Um, or the yellow-headed caracara that's being seen right now. Although ship assisted technically are not countable birds, but there are code numbers that correlate to ABA code numbers that correlate to how rare these vagrants are. We cover about 8 vagrants in the book, and brambling is one of them. It's three. Not the mega rarity. Actually, bramblings actually have nested on the Aleutian Islands a few times. Beautiful bird. Hawfinch also more rare than brambling. Looks a lot like evening grosbeak. Um, it actually is, and I see it drop down. It's the full name is Copathrastus copathrastus. Believe it or not, I need to actually update some of these. I just forgot. Evening grosbeak was just updated in the last 2 weeks. It's been moved back into Hesperophona, the genus Hesperophona. The next closest relative is still hawfinch to evening grosbeak and hooded grosbeak. Lillian actually wrote about it in the book. Actually found an eBird account where they're from a road container ship from China to Santa Barbara. They were able to keep. They were feeding this flock of birds that were hitchhikers on the boat. Some millet, suet, and some thistle seed, and it was actually a package, a brambling, and a rusting bunting actually hitched a ride from China to Santa Barbara. Again, not countable birds though, because you can't count ship-assisted birds. Palace Rosefinch is like the mega rarity. Only one record in St. Paul. This is a recording again, a bit of an or a photograph. Again, a bit of an ode to Tom Johnson, who is no longer with us, unfortunately. But again, a beautiful photo of Tom down here of North America's only record of Palace Rosefinch. The Stokes guides, and it's I'm a believer in this myself. I'm a big believer in engaging in nature. Bird watching is great for our mental outlook in life. The Stokes always really tried to popularize bird watching and watching birds at your feeder. And Lillian wrote this little poem that's in the book. Look, flashing gold and black, see wings descending, watch flocking seed seekers, hear chirping sleigh bells, notice evening grosbeaks feeding, realize you forgot to worry about anything. And that was actually a flock of evening grosbeaks at a special feeder that was built for me. That was a flock in my backyard about 20, I think it was 24 years ago, actually. Oop, backwards there. So yeah, health and wellness, as I mentioned, there's study after study after study now coming out how engaging with nature is good for lowering anxiety, helping mental well-being, all kinds of stuff. When it comes to finches, you want the right feeder with the right seed. Obviously, your grosbeaks want tray or hopper or platform feeders. All of them will feed on sunflower. But the little ones, the siskins, red poles, and goldfinches will certainly like to feast on Niger seed, on those thistle sacks or Niger sacks, I should say, that you see in the picture here, kind of on the lower right. Finch safety, always clean your feeders periodically because mycoplasma has certainly hit house finches, and salmonella is known to hit siskins and big eruptions, and trichomoniasis has certainly hit purple finches at various times across the country. So, clean those feeders uh, and keep the feeders either really close, less than 3 feet from the window, or beyond really about 30 feet from your windows. We have a number of feeder cams which have become popular for people to witness or watch birds while they're sipping their coffee at birds across the country. We have feeder cams in Newcomb in the Adirondacks at the SUNY ESF Newcomb campus. We have one in Casper, Wyoming. We also have one in Alberta in the foothills, which is chock full of grosbeaks every day. And we just started a new one in Alta, Utah. It'll be the first good feeder cam that people will be able to see at least two species. Once in a blue moon, all three species of the rosy finches. So we're excited about that. The honeycreepers is the last section really to cover. Then I'll end here. A lot of people don't realize the honeycreepers are actually were reclassified with the Fragilidae finches about 15, 20 years ago now. Um, one of the most amazing adaptive, radiations ever documented. The thought is about 5 to 7 billion years ago, couple flocks, maybe a couple different times of Eurasian rose finches wandered from Europe or Eurasia and landed in Hawaii, and they adaptively radiated out to 54 species. There are only 16 species left. Unfortunately, we have a whole chapter on just the situation there in the honey creepers in Hawaii. And they adaptively rated to have bills that look very different than what all of us or many of us grew up thinking a finch was, a bird with a conical bill used for collecting seed. Uh, with taxonomy, we're now getting these relationships of birds that don't look that similar. But they're found to be genetically quite similar. And that EV there at the top is a nectivorous species, has almost a thick hummingbird-looking bill in some ways, is one of the honey creepers. The akakiki is actually now functionally extinct. So we cover all 16 species in the book. Uh, but the akakiki now is functionally extinct. There are some in captivity that they hopefully can be able to successfully breed them and release them at some point. But the main reason why these birds are extinct now is because of the introduction of a non-native house mosquito, Culex mosquito. One bite from them gives them avian malaria. They never formed any defenses, and unfortunately, these birds, one bite can kill them. There's also many other reasons that led to decline, loss of habitat, eggs, snakes, all kinds of things in Hawaii. Hawaii is kind of an interesting landscape with a lot of non-native species at this point too. Palila, kind of the one that's still left, but not doing well at all. The one that looks like a finch, kind of looks like a yellow pine grosbeak with a thicker bill, more curved bill. It's a Mamadi seed specialist at high elevations, and it's closely related to bullfinches in Europe and pine grosbeaks here in the United States. Koe is known as kind of the punk rocker of the group. Uh, Again, malaria is one bite is takes them out. The Akiapola owl, this bird's amazing, and it has kind of two bills that really function, but kind of works together in a way too. That the lower bill taps on a tree like a woodpecker. The upper bill, when it finds the insects, the upper bill scoops out the insects. Only lays one egg though. Probably one of the big reasons why it also is endangered. But again, malaria is an issue. Hawaiian key is the only one that actually is resistant to avian malaria. It carries it, it just doesn't kill them. As in the book, we have a research and conservation section. I already kind of covered the Grosbeak project, but also we cover Rosy-Finch project and research. We cover the honeycreeper, things going on with the honeycreepers in the research and conservation section, and we also cover grosbeaks. Uh, there is an initiative called the Birds Not Mosquitoes Initiative, which is a multi-agency partnership led by the American Bird Conservancy, that they're trying to save these birds. And Finch Research Network is part of that team. We've been working with the Maui Forest Bird Recovery Project team, at least with fundraising and sending some money to them every so often. But what they're trying to do is mosquito birth control. Well, all of the mosquitoes carry some type of bacteria in their gut, and you need to have compatible bacteria between the males and females to produce fertile eggs. So what they're actually doing is inoculating the males in California with an infertile Wolbachia bacteria and then flying them out to Hawaii and then dropping them by airplane. And I think they're even starting to use drones for this. And they're dropping the males with incompatible bacteria. So when they actually mate with the female, the females will lay infertile eggs, therefore them, you know, hopefully manage to zero. We'll see. It's a thing that's going to need continuous funding. Uh, and then just I'll end with this here. We have several projects which I mentioned we're fundraising around. And again, there's some research topics that we're always looking to research more. Vocalizations are always going to be important with the finches, genetic studies, also sex ratio. Why is there always more males than females? Song actually in female finches. Also, a lot of the finches actually the females sing. And then you have imitations by some of the finches, and why do some do it and some don't? And then what drives eruptions? Uh, how you can help? You can always make recordings, deposit them into the Foley Library or Zeno Canto or Merlin or BirdNet. We have a number of iNaturalist projects actually, the Finch Research Network. You could become a Finch forecaster and help us with that. But we also have foraging projects around Red Crossbill and Evening Grosbeak, and we just launched an Evening Grosbeak collisions project yesterday. And I end with this: wellness for finches is wellness for you. Take care of those finches in your backyard. They'll bring you lots of enjoyment. Without all these people, the book would not have been visually as beautiful as it is, in the presentation the same. And thank you. I can take some questions. The book makes a great Christmas present. And we also have the Finch Research, the Finch Forecast shirts, and a new shirt we just released is a goldfinch shirt with all three of the North American goldfinches. Any questions out there?
Oh, thank you, Matt. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. I'm more in love with these birds than ever. Very impressed with all the research. I love those foraging charts and the call types, and appreciate your focus on wellness. Let me see. Are there any questions in the chat? I No, I don't see any chat questions this time. So if anyone would like to ask a question, please go ahead and unmute yourself. We'll switch back to gallery view.
Yeah, I just stopped screen share. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I got a little bit of a sinus thing going on, so
No worries. We had a previous speaker program a couple of years ago who touched on that mosquito birth control program.
oh nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Very
Um,
nice.
so some of you may,
Yeah, it's an interesting, it's gonna need continuous funding and a lot of work. I mean, it's unfortunate it got to this point because it's something that's been known for decades, really, that they were sliding off a slope and we'll see. There is, there's people now of Kauai and Maui, but there is still about 3 or 4 thousand feet where they're not um, up over the mountain on the Big Island. So there's still could be some a last refuge there um, on the Big Island to maybe even reintroduce some of these. Somebody just asked a question I thought I saw in the chat.
yeah,
Is that
the
right?
question just popped up in the chat from Bernie. Do you want to speak your question or should I read it for you?
I saw something about Montague.
Yeah, we're in the Montague Plains, over by the airport, by Lake Pleasant, down by the cemeteries. What area of the Montague, by under the power line? What area of the
We
Montague
had
Plains?
some under the power lines. We had some under the power lines, but I think we coming in from the west. It's a pretty big area, right? I've only been there a couple times, so I don't really know it that
I know the
intimately.
area very well.
And I mean, it's a pitch pine barren, so I mean,
Yeah,
wherever
it's the
wherever that seed is available,
yeah.
where the trees have produced a good crop, that's where the crossbills are going to be.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it was a spot where they were regularly showing up for a while.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think that area is certainly worth exploring.
Well, it's a
Particularly,
great area. The Connecticut River is right nearby, so
yeah, yeah. So what do you want when you think peach pine? And if anybody absorbed my foraging charts at all, and I kind of actually mentioned that, when do you think they're actually going to be keying on that? They keyed in on the peach pine most. Did anybody catch that? So pitch pine. All right, go ahead. Were you going to say something, Berkey or
That's
Gail?
okay. I'll let you go ahead.
All right, no.
Yes,
So
yes.
so when it comes to the crossbills, they're gonna, like I said, they're gonna hit that as the beginning of the crossbill year goes. They're gonna hit spruces and hemlocks and tamaracks and stuff
Softer ones.
in well, July, August, September. The last ones that hold the seed are the pitch pine and the jack pine and the red pine and
Harder
the
pine.
Japanese black pine. So a lot of times they're breeding in Montague a lot of times in March, April, May. I mean, that's not to say you can't get them. Some years, if there's a good cold front and nothing else is really formed yet, they'll also extend right into June, July. I know they've actually tried to breed out in the pitch pine barrens on Long Island a couple times in the middle of summer, actually. So,
Very
thank you.
cool. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
you're welcome. Yeah.
Conifer switching. And any other questions about feeding? Where can we get those shirts, Matthew, by the way? Those
You
t
can get them right in the shop. You can get them in the shop on the Finch Research Network.
research network.
Uh,
Okay.
you know, website, and you can get the book anywhere. Really. I mean, you get the book at Amazon. Most of the Barnes and Nobles out there are carrying the book. Um, so it's been an exciting year as far as talks and giving keynotes at the biggest week, and you know up in Acadia, the Adirondacks, and some areas to the south and some areas out west. I did 3 different trips to the West Coast this year as well. So a lot of flying, though. I mean, flying gets on your nerves after a while.
I have a question
Yes, Sandy.
or a comment. Okay, so I now live in White Plains, and I'm enjoying the purple finches coming to my feeders. They're definitely
Nice.
mostly either females or they're immature males. I only saw one male and a lot of females. I had three yesterday or today. I had three, which was great. Am I going to see any pine siskins? And how about the crossbill? This is White Plains. And also, I
Yeah.
thought was interesting. I once had a Evening Grosbeak show up at my feeder. I'm going to look up in my records to see if it was in what you said was uh,
2020,
2021.
21. Yeah.
Yeah,
That was
okay.
that was
Just
the
out of
big
the
year.
blue. And my other house, I had a platform feeder. Where I live now in HOA, I can't really have a platform feeder just to the whole.
Gotcha.
So I'm not going to I have to have a platform feeder to get, I
Well,
just
you
can have
can
one
have a
hanging
tray
feeder.
feeder. You can have a tray, those trays.
I have the hanging feeder.
You can get trays. Don't go to tray feeders. The only thing with the tray feeders is, they don't, the seed you got to fill them up every day. The seed is a little bit more exposed to the elements, obviously.
Right, right.
One of the things people don't realize, and a lot of the books really misrepresented this for years, and we cover it in the book actually, is, there is no difference in plumage between immature male purple finches and female purple finches, unless you're a bander. So all those birds, purple finches don't get their adult plumage until year two.
Okay.
So the interesting thing is, you will get an immature bird, it'll start to look a little red to it, a little
Hmm.
little purple to it, I should say. But generally speaking, they're all the same, and we lump them. We actually say that in the book. For years, they would just show female and male. It's like, it's not just female.
Right, right.
The immature males look like that as well. You
So,
might get some siskins though. It's a multi-species event this year. Again, I don't think they're gonna be dripping off the trees. I think you're going to have flocks of a lot of these finches around when we get all said and done the end of March. I think you're going to have some gettable flocks to go a little bit upstate. What plains though? You might get some red bulls. You never
mhm.
know if we get a really big push. They're already along Long Island already, one or two records already. So it's somewhat
That,
early.
but back to the male female. You said there was a disproportion. There's more females or more males in these finches? Which kind?
A
One
lot
of you
more
said
males. A lot
males in
more.
all the finches, or just
Pretty much all of what we found in the
all of those
literature
different
is
finches? There's more males.
a lot more males. So it's probably something behaviorally where it's more risky to stay, have to sit on a nest because of the
Mhm.
parental pair. It's
Right.
probably where it comes down. And we don't know that for sure. That that Aleutian Island subspecies of rosy finch, gray crown rosy finch, Gracia nucha, some of the estimates on the actual um, male to female skewed sex ratio is 20 to 1, actually.
Hmm.
So way up there. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Um, some of the papers actually, some of the studies actually had that disproportionate number of males to females in that one subspecies, which there's some genetics that actually suggested that bird should be lumped out, actually. Split out, I should say, not lumped out.
Hmm.
Anyway, I hope you see some crossbills, I think will be around too. Go go birding to see these finches to some extent. They do drop into feeders. That's the beautiful thing.
But
We'll
think
see
we
what
have to
you
wait
get.
a while. They're not here now. They're going to come like January, February, March, or
Well,
I
we're
want them
about,
today.
I know, right? You want them today. You're very serious looking like I want them now. We're only it's been about 3, 4 weeks into the eruption event right now. So
Right.
we'll continue on. There is a main pole. Red poles, I've seen red pole eruptions not materialize until January sometimes.
Okay.
So we'll see. Bernie,
I have another question. How are these big forest fires that have been happening in the last few years? How's that going to affect the populations? Because that's affecting their habitats, correct?
Vince, yep, absolutely. So I mean, I get the question, from a Finch forecast perspective. When it came to the Finch forecast, there was that huge outbreak a couple of years ago in British Columbia, and there's two different ways of looking at this. So, like from a cone producing or seed producing perspective, if an area burns the year after that same area had a big cone crop, generally speaking, it's not going to impact the finches necessarily as far as them coming down because that area would typically, after producing a big cone crop, because that takes a lot of energy, the next year the food crop's going to crash in that area. That's what leads to these eruptions to some degree. So the fire was somewhat insignificant. Where it's into play is, you got these forest fires all over the place now. It does take habitat that these birds could be breeding in out of the equation. So does that reduce population levels because of loss of habitat due to fires? Is potentially a very real concern. And that could help also push these eruptions a bit more, like these budworm outbreaks. It's like budworm too. Budworm, if they treat the budworm now, a lot of times they treat the hot spots, which they didn't used to do that. That is probably one of the reasons why we also see a dampening of reproductive success of these budworm birds. Um, but you also, if a budworm outbreak goes on unabated for a length of time, it defoliates the trees and kills them. So that also would take the habitat out of the equation. In fact, we had a budworm outbreak, the biggest and longest running one, at least documented, was from about 1965 to 1988. And that's when we had a peak in a lot of these finch numbers. And it was also when we had 6 of 11 documented super flights of finches occurred from 1969 to 1981. And in fact, I cover that in the eruption chapter with a little bit of material about when did the peak of these super flights occur. And then I end that chapter or one of the paragraphs with it was even the time when we saw boreal chickadees erupting down
Wow.
into the lower
Okay.
states. And there were boreal chickadees in numerous places in the 70s on Long Island. Did you see any of those birds, Berkey?
Yeah, got one in Rye.
There you go. There was also eruptions of three-toed blackbacks back then. And that was at the peak of that budworm outbreak when they were all going on. We haven't had a three-toed now in the state since 2011, 12, I think. And first bogbirds I saw were the last breeders. But, there's actually some talk to my buddies in Canada. They say don't be so shocked if you start seeing some three-toeds again start to occur. So we'll see. There was a pretty big movement of three-toeds this year out of Tavistock in Quebec. So maybe we'll get one to set up shop or at least be seen. But there was no three-toed. There's no three-toed documented in the state in like 13 years, I think. I saw 2 or 3 of them in New York State over the last, I think from 2002 to 2012, I saw 3 three-toed woodpeckers in New York State.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So
That's
any other
pretty cool.
questions?
Matt, one thing I was happy to hear you say is that you're not going to push speciation for each of the now 11 other Red Crossbill call types.
Yeah.
That would make it chaotic.
Yeah, I don't see it happening. I mean, it's fascinating as the group is, and I do think there's, I think there are some subspecies or call types closer to the equator that could maybe raise to the species level because they're a little more isolated, a little more resident. But again, fascinating as they are, they're like a panmixia. Birds don't fit the definition of a panmixia that well. But they kind of follow they do seem to go off on their own good biological trajectory for a while, and then something knocks them out of whack. They get bumping into one another, and then they start to hybridize. In fact, I have, there's some data out there that's now published where they, generally speaking, are about 95% of the time under normal, stable conditions, acting as good biological species. But in years where there's massive, widespread crop failure or co-crop of one species, the actual assortative mating or hybridization drops to about 78 to 80%. So they start to hybridize more, keeping that gene flow. So it's kind of like a braided mixia, kind of doing their own thing, and then they come back together again. It's fascinating birds, though. They know each other under normal conditions. I have numerous encounters where flocks will fly in, land in two trees, two different call types, call back and forth, and the one flock will fly up one direction, and the other flock of a different call type fly off in a different direction. So, anyway, but no, I do not foresee. I do think purple finch, though, is a legitimate split. I could see that happening. There are genetic differences that go back to about 100,000 years ago, I think. And there are subtle differences. The plumages and the songs and the calls are different. And their migratory behaviors are different. The western one really isn't eruptive. The eastern one's the only one that's, kind of has these big boom bust eruptions. So, anyway.
Very interesting. I'm just going to mention for people who are interested in genetics, we have a program coming up in February with a geneticist talking about species splitting and lumping. So stay tuned for that. Any other questions for Matt? If there are no other questions, I want to thank you again, Matthew Young, for this wonderful presentation. The recording will be online in a little bit on our website. Thank you everyone for being here. Have a great evening. I'm looking forward to checking out the book. And
cool.
Great. Thanks again.
Yeah.
And
and have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody. We're only a week out here, right?
Thank you.
Great.
Have a good one, everybody. Take care.
You too.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Bye-bye.